Hey everyone, my name is Luca Aberly, and I'm here with a very special guest today, Mitzi. And she is so incredible. She has an incredible story, and I love what she does. She's helping the world in such an inspiring way. And welcome, Mitzi.
Oh, well, what a joy to be here. And I'm just dazzled by what you're doing. I mean, for me, it's a privilege to be with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So how would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, incredible, amazing, over the top. Nah, seriously. Uh, let's see, I'm 80 years old, which I believe is a good bit older than you. And, and I expect to dedicate the years that remain to me to combating human trafficking, which I think is one of the worst horrors that afflicts mankind.
Yes.
But that's possibly not everything you wanted to know about me. Uh, the reason that I get invited to be on podcasts now and then is I have a background that's a little bit unusual. My father and uncle were the co-founders of the Sheraton hotel chain. They founded it in the 1930s, and we sold it when my father died, but I did grow up a hotel heiress. Woo-hoo.
That is so cool. We stay at that hotel all the time.
Yay! Okay, we don't own them anymore, but at the time of his death, there were 400, which
Wow.
was incredibly cool. And then I married the love of my life, Frank Perdue, the chicken guy. And at the time of his death, he employed 20,000 people. So I got to see up close and personal how two extraordinarily successful guys built businesses from no employees. And then this is a coincidence, but it happened. No employees. They each ended up employing 20,000 people.
Whoa, that is so cool.
But what was super cool from my point of view is, I have an interest in how these things get done. So I was asking them all along, how did you do this? Why did you do that? I know because I asked them, what my father was like as a kid. Did he have any sort of chance of being an entrepreneur? And the answer to that is yes and no. And then let's see, with my late husband, he grew into a family in the chicken business, but his first entrepreneurial effort, his father gave him, I don't remember how many, several dozen cull chicks. And what a cull is one that it's predicted not to do very well. It's a little baby and maybe it's scrawny and it under normal circumstances, they wouldn't give it the feed to grow up. I mean, maybe they'd eat it as a little Cornish hen or something. Well, Frank's father gave him several dozen cull chickens just to practice taking care of chickens and then growing them and selling them. Frank's, I think it was 50 chickens. They outperformed, as in they grew faster, better, healthier than the perfect specimens that were supposed to do well. And Frank suddenly discovered, by adding some extra care, making sure that their water was the right temperature and that they were very clean and all of that, he made what for a kid was a fortune off of his 50 chickens that normally wouldn't have even been allowed to grow old.
Holy.
Okay, then my father had a somewhat different story. It has to do with chickens too. My father was born, if he were alive today, he would be 123. So we're talking a long time ago. But by strange coincidence, his first entrepreneurial activity was in chickens also. And he told me that he wanted to make his fortune. He had these like a dozen fertile eggs, and he was going to hatch them using a little, like, I don't know, he rigged it up himself. I'm not sure how much electricity even they had in 1897. So instead he had like some kind of kerosene lamp to keep the chickens warm, to keep the eggs warm as you incubate them. And then somewhere around 3/4 of the way through the 3-week incubation period, catastrophe happened. The lamp was knocked over, and because it was, fed by gasoline, uh, it it caught fire. And so father quickly put it out, but he was sure that all his dozen eggs would never hatch, that they had been cooked. But he decided, what have I got to lose? I don't think there's a chance that these 12 eggs will hatch. I mean, they've been subject to sudden, very high temperature. But he thought, I'm going to see it through anyway. Lo and behold, the chickens did hatch. He was able to feed them until he could sell them. And I think he made a couple of dollars out of it. But in, 123 years ago, that was a fortune. I mean, I bet it was like $20 or $30 in today's money or more. And he said that he learned a lesson from that. And that is, things can look as if everything's lost, but just keep at it and you may be able to pull it out. So he was just a big believer in sticking through and playing. For him, the odds were high that he wouldn't be a success in that little chicken venture, but it paid off.
That is a really cool story. And I
Yeah, he
think that,
loved to, excuse me.
oh, sorry. I think that everyone needs to hear that message, because I think some people, even with their businesses or a different career or a hobby that they're going after, if something maybe goes wrong, they think, this isn't going to work out, or, this can't go through. It has to be broken. If maybe something like COVID came or whatever, and all of a sudden your business, you had a brick and mortar business, and now there's no more business, and you're like, well, I just have to go, I can't have my business anymore. But I think if it's the tough parts that can really teach you the most valuable lessons in life. And those lessons, like you said, you'll carry on forever, and they really help you, and you really understand, wow, I'm really glad that I stuck with it, and I kept going through with my business and my entrepreneurship, and I really stuck with that. And I think that is a very cool message.
Something else that I've observed in my 80 years, which is I'm all for being optimistic and hopeful and having an upbeat attitude, but I also, just observing people who make it and people who don't. It's not enough to have an upbeat attitude and energy and ambition. No, you've got to prepare yourself psychologically for the times that are really rough,
Yes.
when you get kicked in the teeth. And I think success is as much about being able to pick yourself up after it's gone terribly wrong as
Yes,
it is about having good ideas and pushing forward.
I totally agree.
In fact, again, to get back to the chicken industry, when Frank was born in 1920, so he would be, good Lord, how old would he be? He'd be 101 years old if he were alive today. But he told me that early on in the chicken business right now, you go to the store and you can buy like pieces of chicken, like breasts or wings or legs or whatever. But before, somewhere around maybe the 1930s, you didn't sell chickens for meat. I mean, you might rarely, like once a year, sell chickens, or you might sell spring chickens, which meant male chickens that were never going to produce eggs. But the meat industry and chickens, it just hadn't developed yet. Well, back then, if you were growing chickens, you were growing them for the most part for their eggs. And by eggs, I mean, well, in the chicken world, we call them breakfast eggs. Something that you have for breakfast.
Yeah.
As opposed, the other kind of eggs are what's called hatching eggs, where you want to hatch the bird and then grow it for meat. But the meat industry in the 1930s just wasn't developed at all, until there's something that happened with Frank, and it looked like a just complete total catastrophe, because there was a chicken illness that was just spreading like, I suppose, like COVID. I mean, it was just a catastrophe in the industry. And Frank and his father lost 3 flocks in a row. And that's, if they had another flock that didn't make it, that meant bankruptcy and, just complete failure. And so they tried to think, what can we do about this? Because, what's going to keep us from having another? I don't know how many birds were in a flock back then, but let's say 1,000. and don't hold me to that because I'm just not sure of myself on this, but supposing they had another flock of 1,000 birds that all died, and it's just, they're out of business.
Yeah.
So they started doing some research. We like being in the chicken business. What can we do to get past this terrible situation of where this disease is wiping out all the flocks? And they made a discovery that there are certain breeds of chickens that were terribly susceptible to this disease, but there were other breeds that didn't catch it. And the breeds that didn't catch it happened to be ones that grew very fast, and they were full and they were meaty. And so Frank and his father thought, let's abandon our breakfast egg business. Let's see if we can sell chickens for meat. And they did. And it turned out maybe to be one of the most fortunate things that ever happened to him, because when they abandoned the egg business, the people began, there was a time when you could only get chicken meat in spring. It was called spring chickens. But one of the things that Frank was part of, I don't think he invented it, but he sure pushed it along, was having chickens grown for meat, and then they'd be available year round. And so one of the worst things that ever happened to him turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to him. And I take a lesson from that, because it's certainly been true every part of my career. I think too open.
Yes.
So that's almost the story of my life. Failure, catastrophe, and then leads to something bigger and better.
That is very, very cool. And that is a great quote, because, that's just, I love that so much. And I think, that can really help a lot of people, because, maybe, like you said, the worst thing that ever happened could be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, I'll give a story from my own father's experience. And again, I worry how relatable this could be, because I don't think everybody's planning on starting a hotel chain, but I do think that there's something important to it. When he was 23 years old, he was 26, gotten engaged to my mother. He brought his future wife home to meet his mother. So he's introducing his wife to his mother. And my grandmother, Berta, told my mother, don't marry Ernest. He can never stick with anything. You'll end up poor. Well, father thought this was an enormous wake-up call. So he went to a career guidance counselor to say, I can never stick with anything. My own mother thinks that my family, when I get married, that we're going to end up poor. What's wrong? So the career guidance counselor, he spent an entire, I think it was 8 hours with father, giving him every test you could think of, personality, IQ, just everything you could think of. And at the end of it, he told my father, and remember, this is a man who, at the end of his career, was in the hospitality industry and owned 400 hotels, told my father, you have the worst human relation skills I've ever met. You're the only career that's suitable for you, and I recommend it because you're a smart fellow. You should be a scientist in a laboratory where you don't have to interact with other people. Well, father could have followed the advice of the career guidance counselor, but instead, he told me this. He said he figured that almost everything that you do in life really, in the end, depends on your relationships with other people and your ability to get along with them. And so he decided to devote the rest of his life to learning everything he possibly could about how to get along with people, figuring out what makes them tick, what makes them happy, attitudes that you should avoid. He studied it the way somebody else might take a college course, or maybe a whole degree in college. He read books, he read magazines, he took courses like in salesmanship, because he figured if you want to learn what makes people tick, salesmanship is like a shortcut to understanding people. Because if you're in sales, you're not thinking about what I want. You're thinking how to please the customer. And that means understanding the customer. So he took salesmanship courses. He took, he took public speaking, because you can't be a good public speaker unless you really relate to your audience, know what they're thinking and feeling. And then later on in life, he made it a point to make friends with famous psychologists and psychiatrists. So he just did everything that he could to overcome his weakness of having terrible human relation skills. And he overcame it so fantastically that he became one of the great hosts, in the hospitality industry. I mean, I think there probably weren't many people other than maybe a national politician who was interacting with more people. And, his greatest deficit became his greatest asset.
Wow.
And I think he became good in the hospitality industry because since it didn't come natural to him, and since he studied it like night and day and really cared, he got so good at it that I think one of the keys to why Sheraton grew from one hotel to 400 at the time of his death, it's a lot more now. I think one of the reasons is he had greater understanding of what makes people tick, including particularly his employees. He was famous that if you started working with him, you worked for him for life, and you'd make a habit of going the extra mile for him.
Wow, that is a really, really cool, nice story, and it has a great lesson to it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, the lesson that I would share with everybody is, listen to your career guidance counselor, because they probably know a lot more than a guy, when my father was growing up. But even so, it's not destiny. Maybe they tell you that you're bad at human relations. Father, honest, was able to overcome that just by study and effort and realizing that it was worthwhile. So if you're not smart about understanding people, read books, take courses, just do everything you can to polish your human relation skills, because I think that's almost one of the magic keys to success in this world.
Yes, I think a good quote, forget who it's by, I'm pretty sure it's by, I can't remember, but it's whatever you conceive, you will receive.
And that reminds me of a quote from Napoleon Hill, and I'm afraid I'm going to mangle it, but I'll give it my college try. What the mind of man can conceive, that man can achieve.
Yes.
So I'm hugely in favor of thinking big.
I like that. Yeah, and I think that is a very important and very valuable quote. And I think, like you said, take in all the information and learn everything you can, because that will help you so much. Read all the books you can, take all the courses you can, just get your brain filled up with information, and then you can really start talking to people, and it will really help you in the long run. And I think that is very important.
Well, since we're on quotes, I know you've had Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, on, who is so fabulous. It's just unbelievable. But he has a quote that he may have said it while he was on your show, but whether he did or didn't, hey guys, here it is. Readers are leaders.
Yes, that is one of my favorite quotes from him.
Yeah, because it's so true.
Yes.
It gives you such a leg up on your competition. It makes you stand out.
Yeah, because if you don't read, you're not going to know, if reading is the most powerful thing in the world, because you can get all of that information in your head from different authors and different people. Reading, you get all this information, all these values from all these different people. They've gone through their whole life, and they've brought up these different things, and they fit it all into a book that you can consume and put their knowledge in your head. And so if you read a whole bunch of books, you have knowledge from so many different people in your head and you're living it.
Yeah, and one of my theories of success is the broader the range of tools you can bring to a problem, the more successful you're going to be. And just by reading, but I'm also going to say that, today in 2021, that podcasting, I now spend as much time learning from podcasts as I do reading, probably more even.
Yes.
And since I'm such a fan of reading, it's ungluing me a little bit to hear myself saying that that I think you can get information from podcasts as much as from books.
I agree. I think they're the new way that people, and most of the podcasts are free as well. Like lots of like there's certain podcasts that you can buy a subscription for, but most of them are free on the internet. And there's lots of shows that interviewed hundreds of different people, and you can listen to all those people and you can get all the knowledge you want, because if each podcast episode is an hour and you may be in it, there's maybe 200 episodes. Well, that's 200 hours of knowledge.
Then other things that Father was really good at, he had something I mentioned earlier, that people tended to stay with him for life. They had just spectacular loyalty, but he started out on the right foot with them. And again, I'm not sure how useful this is. Well, I'll tell this story and let's see. Because as a kid, when I was your age, I was always asking him, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And I don't know what your parents are like, but in my case, there were 5 kids. I was the youngest. And the very best way to get my father's attention was to ask him about his work. Because do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have a younger brother who's 9 years old.
Okay, so you don't have quite the situation I did, but there were 5 of us. And when there are 5 kids, you're trying to figure out different strategies to get your parents' attention. Like I have a sister who's the cutest, most adorable person on the planet. And so she'd get parental attention by being adorable. I have a brother who's a writer. He could get his daddy's attention with this neat, cool stuff that he'd write. My magic key to getting daddy's attention was to ask him, why did you do that? And one of the things that I learned is whenever he'd take over a hotel, usually the hotels that were for sale were in financial trouble. Maybe they were about to go bankrupt. And he could buy a hotel, but how could he turn a hotel around when the previous owners were on their way to bankruptcy? So I asked him, what did you do? And he said, the day he took possession of a hotel, that he had bought it, he said he'd invite all the employees, and there might be like 400 of them. He'd invite them all into the hotel's ballroom. And he knew that everybody in his audience was scared about losing their job, because it would be very typical for somebody who's taken over a hotel to bring in their friends and relatives and boot out the people who are already working there. But Father, he told me the first words out of his mouth were always, I want every one of you to keep your job. And he said he'd tell them that right off, because he knew that if you're worried about keeping your job, putting food on the table, it's just, the thought of being fired is just a horrible experience. And he knew that. And so he was aware that if he didn't just reassure them right from the beginning that they're going to keep their jobs, that they wouldn't hear a word that he said after that, which I thought was pretty cool. And then he said, the reason I want you to keep your job is that I know you know your job better than anybody else in the world. And my job is to give you the resources to show the world just how good you are. And he said, you're now part of a team that's going to make this hotel the most successful hotel in the city. And we're going to be an example to everybody else that, hard as times are, this was during the Great Depression, things can turn around and we're going to be an example to everybody else. And so I asked him, why did you tell people right from the beginning that they could keep their jobs? Why didn't you sort of imply that they had to earn it somehow? Yeah, see, like you're on probation or something. And he said, and this is something that I think could be useful to anybody at any time, whatever age you are. He said, at least in his world, there are three major ways to get people to do what you want. And one is through intimidation. He could have stood up there that first day and said, shape up or you're fired. And people would probably shape up. But he said, when you try to get people to do what you want through intimidation, they're going to do it grudgingly. They're going to do the absolute minimum to get by. They'll never go extra for you. So intimidation, he felt, was a terrible way. The next way is, he said, I could have stood up there in front of them and said, do a great job, and there's a raise in it for you. Maybe there's a bonus in it for you. He said, the problem with that is that's bribery, and people don't stay bribed, and they'll work for the bribe rather than for the good of the whole.
Yes.
So of course I asked, well, if intimidation and bribery suck, what should you do? And he said, inspire, don't require. And he said, when he was standing up in front of the employees that first day, he was giving them a vision of, you're part of a team. You're not just making beds or tending bar or whatever. No, you're building the most successful hotel in the city. This team is going to turn things around, and other people will learn from us that things can turn around. And he said, a leader's job is to give people a better vision of themselves. So inspire, don't require.
Wow, that is, I think you said that so well. Is your employees, I mean, I don't have any employees, but I think from what I've learned from my dad and from you is, you want to make sure that you treat your employees like family. Don't treat them like employees, treat them like your friends or your family, and treat them very well. And you want to make them feel like, you want to make them excited to come to work and be
Yeah.
happy and all that. And I think if you do that, you're going to have way better customer responses from the customers who are in the hotels. The employees are going to be happier, and the whole just general environment is just going to be a lot better if everyone is like, yeah, we're a community, we're a team here, and we can do this, and we're the biggest hotel, and or even not even the biggest hotel in the
But
city,
most
but
successful.
yeah, the most successful. We can be the best. And I think that is so true, because we want to make sure that we're happy and not make it feel like a boring job. We want to make it feel like it's a community, something that we want to come to every day.
Well, you've heard of the Gallup polling organization?
Sounds familiar, but
Gallup polls, they're famous, well, for polling people and find out what they're thinking. But the head of it is a man named Jim Clifton, whom I've met a couple of times, and I've read his books. And he is particularly interested in what makes organizations successful. And he has studied, I think he's interviewed, or the Gallup polling organization has interviewed people in like 193 different countries. And I think they've got tens of millions of data points for what I'm about to say, which is, if you take, what we're talking about is employee engagement. Are people happy to come to work? Do they feel valued? Do they feel their contribution matters? Do they feel important in their work? That's the top. The bottom is, I don't have any friends here. I don't like it. I hate coming to work. Nobody values me. They're much faster to scold and find fault. I hate coming to work. Okay, if you take the top 20% and the bottom 20%, the difference in performance is spectacular. Like if you're engaged and you want to come to work, for one thing, you're a brand ambassador. Everybody you see and hear you talk about how great the company is. Uh, you will take almost no sick days. You'll be much more productive, and and you're likely, at its best, you'll stay at that company for life. I mean, not every time, but you will stay with that company much longer. And that's terribly important, because replacing an employee, going out and hiring and training somebody, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars. So a company is just so much better off if people like to work there and there's not a whole lot of people quitting their jobs. The people on the bottom, it's the opposite, loads of sick days. They don't last very long in the job. They may even sabotage the company. So it's such a payoff deal to treat your employees right.
Yes, make sure you compliment them, if they're doing something like that, hey, you're doing a good job, good you, or just things like that, really help your business, help your employees, and just help the all around stableness and the environment of the hotel or the restaurant or whatever it is. It just generally helps your business.
Before our time is up, I would love to talk about what I'm spending my time these days doing.
Yes, please.
Okay, because for most of my life, I've been in communications. I was a writer. I had a syndicated column on the environment. I had a television show for 8 years. I had a radio show for 2 years. In fact, I'm still in television with EarthX TV. So yay. But a couple of years ago, I heard about human trafficking. Now, I want to ask you just the most honest question. And I mean, because I really want to know, how much do you know about human trafficking? Is it just words that sort of glide by, or do you know people who've endured it? Or, as a young person.
Oh, sorry.
Well, the question is, how much do you know about it? And if it's nothing, that's great, because then I get to tell you.
Not very much, to be honest.
Perfect. That means that I'll be sharing something new. Human trafficking, there are more people who are, it's modern day slavery. And at the height of slavery in the United States, there were it's a horrendous number. I think it was 4 million people who were enslaved. But today, the United Nations says there are 40 million people who are enslaved. And it happens in every country in the world, and quite a lot in the United States. And, I bet there are kids your age that you might even know, who somebody is looking through their Facebook to see if they're having quarrels with their parents, and whether somebody can just step in and pretend to be their friend, and then lure them into being sex trafficked. And sex trafficked, the average age in the United States, probably the world, is between 12 and 14. And people, I hope people your age just are so on guard of some stranger who's offering to be their friend and who understands them and says, if it's a girl, oh, you're so mature for your age. Oh, you're so pretty. If a stranger starts, that's called grooming. If a stranger starts grooming you, tell a parent, tell an adult in your life, because one guy on the internet who's recruiting people for sex trafficking, I mean, he might be running 200 different accounts, Facebook accounts, trying to find out who is unhappy at home and who's going to be vulnerable to somebody saying, hey, I can solve your problems. I'm your friend.
Yeah, I think that we need to bring it to awareness a bit more. And it's very sad. And I think we need to tell all the younger people out there, be careful on the internet. The internet is not always a good place. I mean, it's
a terrifying place, because what I just described, it happens a lot. Now, you gave a great answer to one question. Allow me to ask you another. And I don't care what the answer is. I'm just curious. Are you into internet gaming ever?
Uh, Not very much. My brother is more so than me.
What's the most typical age for somebody to be into I mean, this is a good story, not a bad story. I'm not going to be scolding anybody. What's a typical age for people to be into gaming?
I mean, I would say maybe around my age, I would say is a common age.
Yay! Okay, here's why. Because I'm going to boast when I say this, but I'm friendly with, I guess, about 5 people in the gaming industry. And they're talking about creating a game, except they won't call it a game, they'll call it educational entertainment. They want to have the anti-trafficking game. And you get to be a hero in this game. You win points for rescuing people, you win points for educating them. And there's some horrendous sort of things that you'd go through. But this group, I'm going to be talking with them, gosh, next week, that some of the, like, there's a woman who's head of all the gaming companies, or all the big ones anyway, in the United States, maybe even in the world. And they are thinking of creating a game where you get to be the hero and rescue people.
That would be very cool.
And there's such cool stuff, because some of the people who will be writing it, they're like military special ops who know about the dark web and artificial intelligence, and they go chase these people around the world, and it ought to be fabulous.
Yes, I agree. I think a game it'd make it more interesting for kids to learn about it. And it would teach them the importance of it and how to stay safe and how to help other people who may be vulnerable to it. And it's kind of a fun way because it's a game and it could also teach them very important lessons.
Oh, I'm so happy that you look at it that way, because, as you know what makes people your age tick, I don't, but I can guess that it'd be a lot more fun to be in an exciting game written by some of the best game writers in the world. That it's be a lot more fun to learn that way than having somebody lecture at you.
Yeah, I think like if you have a game, because everyone these days my age loves games, and in doing that they would learn way more and they would be way more interested in it than maybe being in a classroom or on an online video call or a course or whatever that's just a lecture on that, and then they're sitting there like, okay, I have to learn this, but it's a little boring right now. I'd be rather doing something else. But if once they're like, oh, this is a game, oh, this is so cool, I can actually do this in the real world as well to help other kids, and like that makes it way more exciting. So that is
Well, I'll
very,
tell you something that I know that I didn't even suspect until I got into this. I was talking with one of the people who's known as one of the greats for game design. He said that we know so much about what motivates people, what rewards, he said that we know how to make a story almost as addictive as a street drug, except that it's for good, not for evil.
yes.
And I mean, I can't wait to see what they come up with, but I hope it has the success that it should have.
I agree. I hope it catches on and it becomes exciting. I think actually if they should almost use it, like I think well it should, is they should use it in classrooms as well instead of doing lectures. If you put on computers, because most classrooms have computers in there, and if you have that, be like, okay, we can go in there and you can learn different things like that, and just have the kids be interacting and talking to their friends about how they can help people and all that. And it's a big community and everyone's getting excited about it and how they can be better on the internet, how they can be safe. Then it becomes I think that'd be a really great idea.
Okay, and it's not my idea, but the organization that I'm part of, it's called Win This Fight. And I don't know if I dare tell you, yeah, I will. The initials of Win This Fight are not an accident, it's WTF. But the reason why we have those initials are there's a guy who's a marketer and he's very famous. And he said, if you want something to spread, if you want people to remember it, there's got to be something a little bit wrong with it.
Yes,
And so this is sort of shocking, but people will remember.
I think yes, I think in marketing, I think just one more quick thing. I think I see like in things that like where things go wrong almost on stage, where like, you know, something accident happened. I think some of the time they actually do it on purpose. So then the internet catches on to it. Like, for example, when Tesla released their new truck and then they threw a rock at the glass and the glass shattered, I think they actually did that on purpose because it blew up all over the internet. Everyone knew about how this happened. And I think people aren't going to care if they're still going to buy the truck, because I don't think anyone needs bulletproof glass most of the time for the average person. But I think that is really cool marketing. Everyone's talking about it. And it's a mistake that I think was made on purpose to really portray that.
I'd love to know, because that makes so much sense. And if it wasn't done on purpose, they should have done it on purpose. Because I bet certainly half the population of America knows about that.
I think it was I don't know if I heard it somewhere. I think one night I was just kind of sleeping and about to close my eyes, and it was just a theory that came up. Me and my dad came up with it, and I'm like, it actually makes a lot of sense. That might not be true at all, but I think it's something that is a good idea, or could be a good idea.
Well, again, the name that I have, the initial name for what I'm doing, it was called the Anti-Trafficking Auction. Not memorable, doesn't roll off your tongue.
No.
A neuroscientist who's a marketer called me up and said, you know, the name that you have sucks. And I was like, what? And he said, there's no call to action. It doesn't roll off your tongue. It's not memorable. You don't have the little bit of wrongness that makes something memorable. Why not try winthisfight.org? And he had actually looked it up on the, on I guess GoDaddy or somewhere, register.com, to see if the domain name was available. It was. And that's how Win This Fight got to be named Win This Fight.
That's a super cool story.
Oh, I love it, because Win This Fight does seem to be, get a lot of attention, but it's because the people who are volunteers just keep coming up with great ideas.
Yes.
Well, I should probably sign off, because I gotta go have dinner with my family.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on today, Mitzi. And it was a pleasure having you on, and you shared so much great knowledge with us today. And thank you so much.
Well, I've loved every second of it. And I have a request for you.
Yes.
Would you please remember me when you're rich and famous?
I will, for sure.
A deal.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say thank you.